Space is quite vast.
We're receiving a signal.
On audio,
Oh my God, it's those stars.
Doc, you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Prepare ship for ludicrous speed.
Into the limitless boundaries of space.
It's in the name of science.
Absolutely marvelous.
The latest result in machine intelligence.
I'll be back. God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs. I am your father. The podcast from Planet
You've got the doc up, right? So you know which ones you're doing.
Yeah, I see you decided to not butcher the names and let yourself do it.
Well, I mean, this time it's not as bad.
No, they're not actually.
I figure, just moving forward, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea considering, the last episode.
I am so sorry. I told you I was in speech as a child.
Well, I'm not blaming you. I just thought it was funny. Relax.
Ugh.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast from Planet X. My name is Ben, and with me today, as always, is my co-host, David.
What's up, guys?
Today's episode, we are tackling the famous, or maybe infamous, depending on who you talk to, Disney movie, Treasure Planet from 2002. Came out the year after the last Disney movie we covered, actually, which was Atlantis. So it's kind of interesting to see the development between that movie and this movie. But we'll get into that when we get into our actual discussion of the movie. For now, David, if you wouldn't mind getting into the synopsis of the movie.
Alrighty, so the legendary loot of 1,000 worlds inspires an intergalactic, I was trying to say intergalactical for some reason, treasure hunt when 15-year-old Jim Hawkins stumbles upon a map to the greatest pirate trove in the universe in Walt Disney Pictures' thrilling animated space adventure Treasure Planet. Based on one of the greatest adventure stories ever told, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. This film follows Jim's fantastic journey across a parallel universe as a cabin boy aboard a glittering space galleon. And boy, is it beautiful, let me tell you.
It is definitely a gorgeous movie. I have to say that. Before we get into our initial thoughts, we're going to talk about the cast and crew, or rather give an overview, as we've been doing the last couple episodes. Like David said last episode, if you guys want us to go back to the old way of us doing this, then let us know. We'd be happy to go back. But beyond that, let's get into it. The movie stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Jim Hawkins, Brian Murray, as John Silver, David Hyde Pierce as Dr. Doppler, Martin Short as Ben, Roscoe Lee Brown as Mr. Arrow, Emma Thompson as Captain Amelia, Michael Wincott as Scroop, Laurie Metcalf as Sarah Hawkins, and Patrick McGoohan as Billy Bones. It was co-written, co-produced, and directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, with the score written by James Newton Howard and 2 songs performed by John Resnick, I believe is how you pronounce that last name.
Pretty sure that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's either that or Resnick. But I don't think that would flow very well. Okay, so initial movie thoughts. You want to go ahead and get into it?
So this one has to follow along with being one of those movies that, like Atlantis, or I just get so drawn into how beautiful the movie is. I mean, that's not everything. I mean, you can't just sell a movie based on how it looks. You've got to have a decent storyline and whatnot to go with it. Because if you're just selling it for looks, then there's tons of movies out there that are 100% garbage that you could pass off as brilliant just because they look really, really good.
Avatar.
Yeah. The Last Airbender 2, I'm assuming is what you mean.
No, I'm talking about Avatar.
Are you really serious right now?
Movie. Yeah, that was a terrible movie.
What?
That was awful.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that in a little bit. But anyways, it's beautiful and I love it. And there's a couple of things that, sometimes falls apart a little bit, where it looks like it might be a little bit more low budget, but most of the time it's just drop dead gorgeous. But it's got a really, really cool character arc with both the main character, Jim, and also the cyborg. So I think that's also like a really touching part of the movie. It's seeing them grow as people, a deep change in heart and character attitude along the way. And there's also a lot of funny moments in there too that keeps it going with a lot of comedic humor and whatnot. But other than that, I'm sure there's a lot more that you could say about it, so I don't want to take everything.
I'm with you in that the movie looks great. However, I will say that this movie didn't pull me in as much as Atlantis did as far as the story goes. It's still a good story, probably mostly because of the source material. But I don't know. I felt the narrative was a little bit too straightforward, maybe, and they let a little bit too much on as far as the character of John Silver, because like literally as soon as he steps foot on the ship, that he's supposed to be the bad guy, at least up until the last few moments of the film when he kind of turns himself around. But
yeah, they definitely gave it away with the "Beware the Cyborg" line right at the beginning.
That and their plan. He literally talks to them in a scene that Jim doesn't see.
Yeah, yes, that too.
About the mutiny. I feel like the movie may have been... I may have liked the movie a little bit better if they hadn't given away all of the cards. But maybe it was their way of trying to build up John Silver as this big bad guy who is kind of trying to foil this kid's plans as a way to show his growth over the film, like you said. But I don't know. It's hard to say what it could have been without those scenes, because we've got the movie that we've got, and I don't know if the movie as it is right now would work without those scenes. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. It's still a good movie, but I wouldn't say it's as good as Atlantis is, as far as the story is concerned.
I could see where you come with that, and I don't disagree in the slightest. I'm totally with you that I feel like Atlantis has a far superior plot line to go with it, but all in all, it's still really nice. And if the character arc wasn't so good, I probably wouldn't like it as much, but it really touches at the heartstrings. So
yeah,
well, tugs at the heartstrings, I should say. So I don't mind it one bit. It's a really good movie.
All right, with that, let's get into our first talking point. It's hard not to talk about Treasure Planet without talking about its lackluster box office performance. With a budget of $140 million and only made $109.6 million worldwide. What do you think contributed to this performance?
I could not say exactly. I remember seeing it pretty early on in my life. It's not like it's a movie that I've just seen in the last 5 or 10 years. It's been a long time since I first seen this, so I don't know what the dynamic would have been then that wasn't true when I first saw it. It's really good, and I don't know if it could have been maybe competing with other like huge titles at the time, or if this might have been just leading into the overall failure that Disney animation went through in the early 2000s and whatnot, because after the Disney Renaissance that easily got us through the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't really until I think Frozen came along that saved Disney animation, because there for a while it was very lackluster. I mean, there's a few hidden gems here and there. I think Atlantis is wonderful. I don't see a problem with Treasure Planet, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Lilo and Stitch, I think, is also a really good movie that happened to be sprinkled in through all their miserable missteps. But everything else, it's kind of That's what Pixar was for.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why they bought Pixar, because if you can't beat them, you gotta buy them.
Looking at the weekend that it came out, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia article again. The weekend that it came out, there was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Die Another Day, which I assume is a James Bond film.
Yes.
And The Santa Claus 2. All came out that same weekend.
Oof. Okay.
So, you can imagine why this maybe didn't do so well. I mean, it is a Disney kids animation film, but at the same time, you're putting it up against two franchise giants.
Yes.
And then you've got The Santa Claus 2, which, I mean, it was a pretty good sequel, but, you know, I think that people would probably go to see that over a sci-fi film, probably.
Probably.
A sci-fi film with no credit to its name.
Exactly.
That it's produced by Disney.
Exactly. And, you know, take your opinions aside for what Santa Claus 2 became. It does follow up on the really good movie, The Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. That was a hit. At least I think it was a hit. If it's not, then I'm wrong, but I loved it. I don't think the sequel lived up to it at all, but hey, whatever. Going into it, you'd have high expectations, I would think.
Yeah.
Harry
exactly.
Potter? Holy cow. What 90s kid wasn't heavily involved with Harry Potter besides me, because I never, ever could get into it.
Well, me, because of my parents, but, you know, yeah.
You are slightly on the shelter side of things. So
yes.
there are those out there who were against witchcraft of any kind, and so there's that group. But as far as that goes, that's a relatively small niche, I think.
Yeah.
Being in the Bible Belt, I don't think it really mattered much here, because there was tons of people that loved Harry Potter and was gobbling up those books like crazy. So that might be something that had to do with it. What time frame was that? Like, was it late year, like Q3, Q4?
It doesn't say what date it came out on. Oh, November 27th, 2002 was the release date.
November 27th,
so that
2002.
would probably be Q4.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, to be honest.
I would
Maybe
have
the
to say
war?
it's probably what it came out again, what it came out again.
Yeah, probably.
As far as the other movies.
And the fact that it cost a lot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But 109 million worldwide sucks. It really does.
And there was only 36 million of that was domestic.
Whereas you can have movies easily make, what, 20, 30 million domestic easily in, like, the first, like, 2 or 3 weekends. Sometimes it's the first weekend. Sometimes it's disgusting how much they make.
Like all of the MCU movies, especially the last one that came out.
Exactly.
Endgame. Woo, that made a ton of money. Yeah, I think that's probably the major, but beyond the budget, that was probably the major factor, I would say.
Ouch.
Yeah. It kind of sucks.
It kind of does suck, because looking into this, I kind of wanted to see what was to come. All right. So you ready to move on to the next one?
Sure.
All right. So talk a little bit about the animation in CGI, if you will. One of the film's major goals was making sure that the visual design of the movie was so consistent that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between CGI and Disney's traditional animation. Do you think they achieved this goal?
I would have to say, for a large portion of the film, yes. There's definitely times, like with Atlantis, where you can see the divide between the traditional animation and Disney's traditional hand-drawn whatever animation. But I think they did a much better job of concealing the divide in this movie than they did with Atlantis, especially with they didn't have any CG characters in Atlantis, but when John Silver first came on screen, I could definitely tell that parts of him were CG, like his arm and his leg and the thing on the side of his head.
Yep.
But when you're watching the movie, you don't really pay attention to that. It's not distracting at all, which I would say constitutes them, fulfilling that goal.
I'm going to break it down into what you perceive and what they state as the goal. If you take what they stated as a goal, if this was what they actually stated, and that was to not be able to tell the difference, then I'm going to say they failed. Because there is times you can easily spot the difference. But I'm also going to go with what you said and say that, is it distracting or plot breaking in any sort of way? No, absolutely not. It works so well. Half the time it's just there. And I don't think it matters that 99% of the time to where it does qualify as not being able to tell the difference. Because if I'm looking for it, yes, you can tell. It's not hard to. But most of the time, it just works, and it looks... His arm and his leg kind of looks more consistent, I think. It's always that little mechanical spinning, looks like a choo-choo wheel on the side of his head.
Yeah.
That is the part that... and his eye, too. That always gives it away, for sure, when it comes to him. But other than that, I think they did a really good job. Some of the scenery looks like it's kind of inconsistent as well. And I don't know if there's parts of the background that were CGI in some places and then were just traditional animation in others. I have a sneaking suspicion that's the case, and I think the CGI parts are the ones that really blow my mind as far as the color is concerned, because it looks really good. And then there's other parts where it looks like maybe they could have used a better color choice, a better color palette, if you will, because they kind of look dull and muted, and they kind of get lost in the background sometimes, as far as, this area of the sky is looking a little more blue, where this area of the sky is supposed to look a little more black. It looks muted, and it looks like somebody smeared butter across the entire scene, and you can't really see a clear distinction between one area and the other. Whether that counts or matters to anybody, that's up to them. It wouldn't pass as far as, HDR content enthusiasts these days, but
Yeah.
I could care less. Just as long as it doesn't look like it's pixelated and garbage like 720p YouTube does sometimes, or even worse, 360.
I can't watch anything on 360p anymore. I can't.
It looks so bad.
Ugh. It's disgusting.
And imagine that was just...
Get it out of my house.
That was the standard just, 10 years ago? Maybe 15.
It's probably a little bit longer than that, yeah. Oh, boy. Okay. Speaking of the CGI, I wanted to dedicate an entire topic to this. It's kind of combining the first 2 points that we're talking about, but I wanted to bring it up because it's a major factor in why the budget got so big. Mm-hmm. Deep Canvas was a technology that was originally developed for 1999's Tarzan. The team came up with a process called the team being the team that worked on Treasure Planet. Came up with a process called virtual sets, wherein they created entire 360-degree sets before they began staging the scenes. They combined this process with traditionally drawn characters in order to achieve a painted image with depth perception, and enabled the crew to place the camera in anywhere in the scene and maneuver it as they would maneuver a camera for a live-action film. In order to test how a computer-generated body part, specifically John Silver's cyborg arm, would mesh with a traditionally animated character, the crew took a clip of Captain Hook from Peter Pan, 1953, and replaced his arm with a cyborg arm. The use of the technology definitely did not help with keeping costs for the movie down, as it ended up being the most expensive traditionally animated film ever made. Do you think that doing things more traditionally would have served the creator's intent, or was the use of this technology inevitable?
In certain case scenarios, being able to pan around a shot in the way that they did is truly breathtaking in this film, and the purpose of the shot would not have been fulfilled had they not been able to do this. And the scenes that I'm mostly thinking about when I say that would probably be a lot on the boat, because they did a lot of beautiful panoramic shots of that, getting different sides of it, specifically when people would need to tie down the sails or hoist the sails. They did a lot during that type of thing. There's also the scenes with the map itself that opens up out of that globe, that tiny gold sphere that it's in, and it basically turns into a giant holographic globe of the entire universe. And they did a little bit of panning around that. For those scenes, I think it's important, but I also think that they could have been handled in another way. And for everything else, it's a lot of portrait and also a lot of profile shooting between the characters that they did. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously not important for that at all. And there's a lot of that in this film, where there's a lot of close-up portrait shots. Jim and Morph in the barrel, that whole thing was definitely just one frame, easily done. A lot of the crew shots is easy to do with just a profile shot or a portrait shot of all of them. There's not a lot else on the planet itself that needed, when they got to Treasure Planet, that needed any kind of 360 maneuverability, besides maybe the and I don't really know if they did a 360 shot or if it was just spinning, but the internal mech of the planet, where the giant fireball lasers were shooting into the core of the planet, or whatever that was exactly. I think they may have done a little bit of the 360 revolving around that shot, or it could have been just the core of the planet itself moving. I'm not entirely sure which way they did that.
I think it was just the core of the planet moving, if I'm remembering correctly.
See, yeah. So then there's a lot that it didn't need to be done. So I wonder how much of this was actually necessary, and how much of that they could have just done traditional the entire way, been done with that. Because I don't think there's any key critical scenes that are like critical to the plot of the movie that were done in that 360 setup.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I'm with you in that a lot of the shots wouldn't need this technology. Granted, they are using it to also do all of the CGI parts for like John Silver and whatnot.
True. True.
But at the same time, they could have also just hand animated John Silver and all that. I think that it was an interesting experiment, and like I said in the previous point, I think they did it really well. But at the same time, I feel like the movie could have easily been done without, spending all this money on a technology that realistically doesn't add all that much to the movie, other than making it look really good.
Yeah. It wasn't mission critical.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't be movie breaking if you didn't have it.
Yeah, and who's to say that if they didn't, stick to traditional hand animation and use like matte paintings and whatnot, that the movie still wouldn't look just as good. So, yeah, I'm more voting on the side of it's interesting but unnecessary as far as that goes.
I agree. So, leading into what I think could have been probably one of the best like Disney Channel shows if they had actually done this. Apparently, a lot of people probably don't know it, and to be honest, I didn't know it. And seeing how Atlantis turned out, not Atlantis, The Emperor's New School turned out, I don't know if I like this idea, but there was an entire canceled franchise. So before Treasure Planet was even shown in cinemas, Thomas Schumacher, then president of Walt Disney Feature Animation, mentioned the possibilities of having direct-to-video releases for Treasure Planet as well as a television series. He stated that they'd already had a story and some storyboard concepts and a script for the sequel to Treasure Planet and what it could be. And they also had in motion a notion of what the series could be as well. So they had a sequel, and then they had a series all in the works before the movie even hit the theaters. And then director, Juan Falkenstein?
Probably June.
Is it June? Could be.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's either Juan or June. It's Jun, so it probably is June. I think you need the A for Juan, but whatever. And screenwriter Evan S. Splitopoulos?
Spiliotopoulos. Sure. Sorry, we butchered another name. Cross it out. Put it on the list. Just put it on the list. Sorry.
Anyways, the two of them began an early development on Treasure Planet 2. And the sequel, Jim Hawkins and Kate, his love interest and classmate at the Royal Interstellar Academy, must team up with Long John Silver to stop the villainous Ironbeard from freeing the inmates of Botany Bay Prison asteroid. William Dafoe was set to voice Ironbeard, and the sequel was canceled when Treasure Planet disappointed at the box office. Imagine that. What do you think about the plans for the sequel? What would you have proposed to do differently?
I think the plans for the sequel seem pretty interesting, especially considering that Willem Dafoe was set to voice one of the characters.
Yeah.
As far as the TV series goes, you and I have both seen, and I'm sure there's people in our audience that have also seen, the direct-to-video Atlantis 2, which as it turns out, is just 3 episodes of the canceled TV series that they stitched together and threw out there.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I should have just stuck with Atlantis. Of course, Emperor's New School also proves my point there, too.
Yeah, that wasn't a great show either, but it did make it to air, so, it's got that.
It was terrible.
Yeah, so Emperor's New School, and also the just god-awful Atlantis sequel / 3 episodes stitched together god-awfulness that it was. Mm-hmm. I would say I would have to stay away from the series if there was ever going to be one. As for the direct-to-video sequel, I mean, like I said, it seems interesting because of Willem Dafoe, but we've also seen some of the Disney direct-to-video sequels, and those also are not that great. So it's hard to say. If it was a theatrical sequel to Treasure Planet, I think it would have been cool.
Yeah.
But Disney's direct-to-video stuff has never been known for its quality.
No, and it's because they used it as like a training ground for new animators. They would put them on these direct-to-video sequels so that they could build a resume and get some experience before they were ever put onto like a big budget theatrical releases, and they wouldn't be able to use the animators that they always use for their theatrical releases because they were always working on the next big thing. And of course, there's only a finite time that these people have. You got to do all this stuff by hand. At least back then you did. Mm-hmm. There's just only so much talent, and there's only so much that can be done. So they always use the direct-to-video as a training ground, and you could always tell because it was always such crappy looking animation compared to the actual original series or movie, whatever they were basing it off of. Mm-hmm. And it never worked. And I don't know if it was always because of the animation or if a lot of it had to do with the storyline too, but there's very, very little Disney sequels that went direct to video that I actually enjoy. And that's sad.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Like, did you know that the Cinderella movie has 2 direct-to-video sequels? I didn't know that.
I know the Cinderella 2 and then Cinderella 3. Is that the same thing?
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's those.
I have blocked that entire thing. I'm not even a fan of the original Cinderella either, but I've blocked that entire thing from memory. I can understand Disney needing to train people for their animation processes. However, these are just like soulless cash grabs 99% of the time. Yes. Yes. And that's
there's
the
no point for a Cinderella 2 to exist, nor a Cinderella 3.
No.
Or Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, or Fox and the Hound 2, or I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking of, but God, it's not needed. None of those are needed.
No.
So if that's the way that this was planned to go, then I'm kind of glad it went the way of the dodo.
Yeah, I am okay with that too. I think it would have been really cool and interesting to see, but given how Atlantis turned out, clearly, and then given how a few of their others turned out, I know it just would have been a giant disaster, and I wouldn't like it anyway. So
yeah,
let's just leave it at that.
Okay, so before we get into our final thoughts, is there anything else that we didn't bring up that you want to talk about?
What do you think about all the very cool and interesting technology that we've got going on with this movie? We've got holographic books that he reads as a child. We've got these giant solar sails, and I guess cells as well. I'm assuming there was solar power something or another that wasn't in a sail.
So. Yeah.
But there's just so much cool stuff, and it looks so awesome. I love it.
the visual design of this movie is definitely cool, and the fact that they've kind of combined the new with the old. I believe when I was reading about it, their rule was like 70-30, so 70% traditional, like old school, the ships and whatnot, and then 30% sci-fi.
Gotcha.
Which definitely shows in the way that they've put everything together. Because, I mean, certainly he could have just been reading a tablet, but it's a lot cooler to think, you know, he's got this holographic book. You can flip the pages and things still shoot out at you, and
yeah,
it's got sound recording and everything, and it's cool.
It was cool. I love it. And honestly, I would rather 100% have that right now for a kid to read than the tablets.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that nobody ever visually put into perspective. Like, nobody thought of these ideas when they were making these sci-fi movies in the 80s and the 90s. Nobody thought of flat screen TVs. It was always modern, or I guess modern as far as the time frame of the movie was set in. CRT televisions. It was... Nobody had any of this concept in their head of flat screens or just tiny tablets or anything like that. And it's like, holy cow, all this stuff that nobody thought of that is like common day. But then you get to something like the book. And I want the book. I want the holographic book. Let my kid turn the pages of an actual book, not be glued to a screen or a tablet of any type, and still get that cool interactive feeling with it. To me, that is so much better for the imagination.
Yeah. I find it, even as an adult, I find it a lot easier to pay attention to a book that I have in front of me that I want to read than, like, an ebook that I have on my phone.
Yeah.
Which sucks because, you know, books take up room and, you know, it's not room that I have anymore.
Ain't that the truth?
Man.
I think that's where I like the voice, that the voice recording that went with the book, because nowadays I can actually get into audiobooks a lot easier than I can regular books on tablet, and then regular physical media books as well, where I have to read something. It's like, my eyes don't have the energy to do this for any length of time, and like you said, I don't have space for regular books.
Yeah.
So I'd rather listen to it. And the fact that they had it narrated at the same time is just awesome. I love it. What else?
I'm less with you on the audiobook thing, but I do get where you're coming from. I would still prefer a physical book over an audiobook, mostly because I've got so many podcasts and stuff that I listen to that I don't really have time for anything else either.
I get you. If we had Benjamin Franklin's library, where it's literally an entire freaking building that we just donate to the federal government at some point.
Yeah, I know, right?
Then it's different, but I don't have that space.
Yeah. No kidding.
What else on that? Anything?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, what you're bringing up brings up a lot of the visual design of the movie too. I think, like I've said many times before in this podcast, I think the visual design of this movie is superb, fantastic. It's absolutely one of, if not the best thing about this movie, like 100%.
Gotcha.
So, is that it? Is that all you want to? Is that the only thing extra you want to talk about?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that covers it.
All right. I think that's where we're going to leave it as far as our discussion goes then. What would you give this movie out of... what am I going to do? Out of 5 holographic books.
You disappoint me.
What were you going to say?
You didn't bring Morph into it.
I mean, it's Morph, I guess. What am I going to say? 5 pink blobs. That can
Okay, if
shift.
you're gonna put it that way, then we need to stick with holographic books. It's a solid 3.5.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier too, and I would have to say that it's a solid 3.5 for me too. It could be more if I enjoyed the story more, but the story being what it is, it's enjoyable, but it's not like 4.5 out of 5 for me.
No, and it's the character development that sets it above par for me, because if it hadn't been for that, then it's kind of a everyday run of the mill type adventure with all the additional space and sci-fi animation added onto it.
Yeah,
It's nothing special, so it's just boring, whatever.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so our final act of the podcast, as always, is to find out which movie we're going to cover next episode. I've got our movie list up. I've got our random number generator up, set to 100, and we are going for A Scanner Darkly, number 3 on our list. Interesting.
Have you ever heard of that before? I know you have to if you put it on the list.
I have heard of it only because I own it. I have not seen it yet. It's one of those movies I picked up from Goodwill. Not when you were here, but one of the many times I've run out to Goodwill and just bought movies and brought them home.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, we shall see, because I have the faintest idea of what that is.
I know it's got Robert Downey Jr. in it. But that's
young
all I know.
Robert Downey Jr., I'm assuming, or is this more recent?
Younger. Let me see when this came out. 2006. So it was like right before. Right before Iron Man.
Okay. Wow. Why have I never heard of this?
Oh, it's got Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, Woody Harrelson.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
We'll have to see. All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked, be sure to leave a rating on whatever podcasting platform you happen to be listening to. And, we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast from Planet X. We are hosted, edited, and produced by Ben Mason and co-hosted by David Knowles. Our theme song is produced by the Tormented Teamster. You can follow Ben on Twitter at BenPlaysVidyaS, that's Ben Plays VIDYAS, and you can follow David on Twitter at Car6x16. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can contact the show on Twitter at PlanetXPod or by email at podcastfromplanetx@gmail.com. That's all for this episode. We'll see you next time.